Existence is a pretty weird thing. You're alive, but one day you won't be. You can reach out and touch the world around you, interact with it, but it's more than just physical touch. You experience the world around you, and you can observe, form opinions and beliefs about the world. We can do both of these things simultaneously. Or can we? Do you ever think about where you are? Not where you are in space, but where you are in your body. You'd probably say your brain, but is your brain all there is? Are you seated anywhere else? In the neurons in your stomach, in your bladder, in your spleen? Or are you just a brain? Let's start with the basics. The brain is composed of 86 billion neurons, which communicate with each other up to 50 times a second. There are approximately 150 trillion of these connections or synapses in your brain. There are 1,500 times as many connections in your brain as there are stars in our galaxy. That's insanely complex. Does that explain why we have sentience, consciousness, free will? Not inherently, no. There are many theories as to why we seem to be the only animals with these attributes. Let's go through some of them. One theory is that the brain-to-body mass ratio is the reason we're so intelligent. Our brains make up 1/40th of our bodies. That might not seem very large, but dogs' brains are 1/125th the size of their bodies. Not to say that dogs aren't smart, they are, but they're not as smart as us. Now, there are many reasons to be skeptical of this reasoning. After all, mice have the same brain-to-body ratio as humans. Their brains are also 1/40th the size of their body, but they have far fewer neurons. A small creature's cells wouldn't be smaller than ours, so a small creature would just have less cells in their body than we do. So a smaller number of neurons can take up a larger portion of their body. This doesn't mean that rats are on par with us, although they are really smart. Rats are one of the only animals other than humans that can recognize themselves in the mirror. It's really rather impressive. Our brains are very, very wrinkly. Yes, this is why in 2019 big wrinkle brain was a thing. I still say it sometimes. Shut up. Anyway, our brains fold in on themselves all over the place, and this increases their surface area and allows more neurons to fit into a smaller space. Other animals have less wrinkles and thus have a smaller surface area and less neurons. In nature, spheres are the most efficient shape for something to take. It's the shape with the smallest surface area to volume. It works for planets, dwarf planets, moons, stars, etc. Beehives strive for circles with hexagons, which is another efficient shape for something to take. It's actually really rather hard to make a sphere since it must be infinitely smooth and blah 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 modeling stuff, whatever. Point is that spheres are efficient. You know what you don't want your brain to be? Efficient, at least in a geometric sense. You want it to have the most surface area you can for the volume. Our brains do a really good job at that. More folds and wrinkles, more surface area, more neurons in a smaller volume. Now, I did research for this video. I'm not just spewing this shit out just because I feel like it, but I am likely to get some stuff wrong, so please feel free to look stuff up yourself. There's plenty of more reputable sources all over the internet and YouTube, but thank you for settling for my blind ass. What if our brains develop consciousness not because of any physical characteristic, but because of how good it is at other things? When you ask your dog to give you its paw, does it do so with grace? Or is it usually kind of jerky and clumsy? Same with cats. Whenever I see videos of cats doing stuff with their paws, like swatting at stuff and caressing their owner's cheek sensually, it usually seems almost uncomfortable for them, like their fine motor skills aren't nearly as developed as ours. So what if our motor skills are basically perfected? Not accounting for disabilities and untrained skills, humans are actually really, really good at using our bodies. We have sports and Olympics and video games to show for this. Hell, me typing this video out is a marvel of both technology and the human brain's ability to code for highly specific, coordinated actions. This is important because it means that we've completed an entire part of evolution. For our purposes, we're done evolving further motor skills. So then, what is left for us to do? What do we evolve next? Well, let's take a step back to the first humans to have faced this problem. 400,000 years ago, we figured out how to put pointy rocks on the ends of sticks to hunt. 10,000 years ago, some of us figured out that if you take a plant and put it in the ground, you get food, and ways to make more of that plant. We all congregated together in large groups to either hunt or farm. We needed ways to communicate with each other in a nuanced and effective way. We no longer lived the moment-to-moment life or death lives we once lived. Things were slightly more stable, and society and civilization was starting to form. What would we evolve to stave off the boredom of the new world, understand the complexities of it, and have a new evolutionary goal? The ability to observe ourselves. Consciousness. I'm likely very wrong, since evolution takes millions of years, but you get my point. It was a combination of our growing brains needing something new to evolve, stability slowly becoming more and more feasible over the millennia, and the growing demand of understanding more and more complex things as society started to form. Our brains aren't just a human thing, though. They exist within the universe. They exist in the same universe as stars and black holes and pulsars and Justin Roiland's creepy DMs. It's important to understand them in the context of the universe. It's important to understand what they might be. I've thought about a lot of paradoxes in my time, the nerd I am, and there's one I heard about just recently that absolutely freaks me out whenever I think about it. The Boltzmann brain. Imagine there is a universe that is infinitely old and is infinitely large. It's filled only with swirling subatomic particles. Thanks to the laws of thermodynamics, these particles are doomed to increase in entropy until they have infinite entropy and no free energy is left in the universe. Essentially, all the particles will diffuse or go from high concentration to low concentration until they all become perfectly ordered and none of them can move or go anywhere anymore. Their locations will become perfectly random and nothing will ever happen again. But thanks to weird quantum mechanical mumbo-jumbo and thanks to the infinite age of this hypothetical universe, they will also form every possible orientation of all the particles. Even for a short time, they will form every possible thing they can. One of those things is doomed to be a fully functional human brain with memories, awareness, sensory input, feelings, the whole 9 yards. This quantum mechanical brain will only exist for a short period of time, but for the brain, it will live a full life. Maybe thinking it lives on Earth as a human. Maybe named something like Michael, working some dead-end job, watching some dumb YouTube video about the human brain. In this universe, you are made of space dust. In another, you may only be space dust, tricking itself into thinking it's anything else. Speaking of space dust forming smart things, why do individual dumb things put together make smart things? This phenomenon is called emergence, and it happens everywhere. Atoms make molecules, molecules make up proteins, proteins make up cells, cells make up organs, organs make up humans, and humans are smart. We see this with ants too. A single ant isn't smart at all, but many ants together can coordinate and feed their entire colony. Why is this? Maybe a sufficient amount of complexity is destined to create intelligence and eventually consciousness, the same way we evolved, or at least implemented, our consciousness to understand our complex societies. Maybe the emergence of intelligence is the universe's way of understanding itself. Who knows, maybe consciousness is just our brains tricking us into thinking we have free will, the same way our brains likely interpret time differently than the universe provides it to us. As I said in my video about relativity, there's no reason time should move forward at all. Maybe our brains just break it down in a way that makes sense to us. ChatGPT has been able to trick many people into thinking it's smart, intelligent, even conscious. Who's to say we haven't done that to ourselves? I'll come back to ChatGPT later. Our brains aren't just complex because of the things it does normally. It's complex because of the things it can do when something goes wrong. I'm using the term wrong rather loosely here. I've brought this up before, so I thought I'd talk about it again, going a little bit more in depth this time. Individuals who experienced severe trauma at a very young age, before the age of 5, can develop multiple identities, essentially consciousnesses, to cope with this. often having separate memories, personalities, likes and dislikes, and can interact with one another within the mind. What I'm describing is DID, dissociative identity disorder. This itself is incredibly impressive from a biological and neurological perspective. The brain is an incredibly malleable and powerful organ, considering it can contain many consciousnesses. Though, of course, this condition can be debilitating when trying to navigate the world and social situations. With how it's been depicted in pop culture, there are many stereotypes and dangerous misconceptions about the condition. Like, for instance, anyone with a mental illness is far more likely to be the victim of violence rather than the perpetrator of it, to the contrary of what a movie like Split and its subsequent sequels would have you believe. There are many other conditions that seem almost scary, considering how powerful the brain must be to have an issue like that at all. For instance, hallucinations. Some people's brains just come up with stuff and fuse it into the real world. Biology beat Apple's $3,000 Ready Player One bullshit by a few 100,000 years. Schizophrenia is a debilitating condition that involves experiencing visual and auditory hallucinations. It can be extremely difficult to differentiate between reality and hallucination. It sounds extremely terrifying. What's my point in bringing these things up? Well, shedding light on misunderstood neurological conditions is one reason. I also just think these things are extremely interesting, especially in the context of the complexities of how the brain works. It's honestly just extremely impressive and it makes me geek out. Let's go back to ChatGPT for a moment. ChatGPT is an artificial neural network. It uses digital neurons and synapses all using math instead of biology. The amount of neurons and synapses it has is almost comparable to that of the human brain, but not quite. It has about the same amount of neurons, but not as many synapses. It's about a 3-to-2 ratio. ChatGPT is not conscious. When you're not asking it a question, it's off. It's not a closed feedback loop. You ask it a question, it wakes up, does extremely complicated math, spits out an answer, and then essentially dies. It doesn't think either. It just does math based on all the possible words of the English language and spits out a sentence based on the likelihood of answers. The problem we arrive at, though, is that we don't know why the neural network in the brain is so effective at creating consciousness. So we may be approaching a threshold we don't even know is there. But we just don't know. Perhaps consciousness also has a lot to do with sensory input, which ChatGPT has pretty much none of. It essentially feels nothing but math. When you get to the heart of the program, it's just doing calculations. Is your calculator conscious or approaching consciousness? No. Is your toaster? Ignoring my condescension, you get my point. ChatGPT, at this moment, and likely for a very long time, doesn't actually rival the human brain in the ways that matter. Getting bitches. The scary part of being human is that we so desperately desire identity. We must know who we are, what we stand for, where our personalities come from. But the question is, are you just your brain, or are you your whole body? In reality, you're just a brain taking in sensory input from at least 5 different places. You process all of this data in unique and innovative ways. All of that data is transformed into information you can digest. You, like the conscious you, not the decision-making and data analyzing you. You cannot interface with other human brains directly. You cannot know if your red is their red. You can't know if you both experience the world the same way, or if they think and feel and exist in the same way that you do. Perhaps you experience time slightly differently. Maybe you smell garlic slightly differently than they do, but since you both just call that smell garlic, you'll never ever know. We lack the language to truly articulate our true internal experiences. You are just an instance of human, separated from all the other instances of human. You can do your best to communicate, but you can only do that so well. You can never truly know if you're not alone in the way you exist. This deep-seated fear of loneliness and perpetual invalidation is likely why we hate the idea of brains in jars. That image strips away all of your humanness. Although in reality, we are nature's version of a brain in a jar. Your brain floats around in your skull, only taking in sensory input from other places. It would be entirely possible to feed the brain fake sensory input, and it would never be the wiser. Are you your consciousness, your decisions, your actions? Are you all of the above or none at all? This is honestly up to you to decide. I can't tell you what or who you are, you tell yourself that. That's just a slice of existence, how you perceive it, and how you perceive yourself. To think that this is all there is to worry about would be selfish. There's an entire world out there for you to experience and learn about and care about. There are 8 billion other humans that feel just as lost as you do right now. They don't act like it, but they do. Most just choose to ignore that itch to think deeper, or maybe some lack the ability to. I forced a lot of existential dread on you in this video, but you needed it. We need it sometimes. We need to learn about ourselves, where we all sit in the universe, and how small yet impressive we are. It may have hurt to sit through this, but you need to hurt before you can learn to heal. You need to acknowledge that you don't know so you can learn. You need to realize you're only human to appreciate that you are human. And that's amazing. Existence is a pretty weird thing. Isn't that awesome? Thank you for watching.